Excellent. All right. Live on that front, almost live on Instagram. There we go.
Awesome.
Great. And here we are. Estevan, my friend. Oh my goodness. People, welcome back to the Glad Trad podcast. I'm Jordan Pacheco. Very happy that you're here. And today's going to be such an awesome episode. I've been very excited. I've been hoping to talk with my friend here, Estevan Covarrubias, at the Seeking Sainthood show. Absolutely wonderful content you've been putting out, by the way, Estevan. But you sent me for a loop a couple of weeks ago because you made an announcement that was very big. I was like stopping everything and to listen to what you had to say because Estevan and I, we did an episode together earlier. I titled it, I don't know if you saw my title for it, but I said, he wants to get holy or die trying, is I think what I said. Right. Yeah, which was an old Catholic shirt that I had in high school. But you actually took it to the gusto, man, because as of right now, I'm talking to someone who's going to be entering seminary this year. Is that true?
That's right.
Praise God. How crazy. I didn't even realize that was something that you were discerning. So I want audience, those of you who will be tuning in, we're going to be hopefully fielding any of your questions and comments. Please, of course, pray for Estevan as he starts his long process, 8 years, right? That's how long seminary is.
Right. Yeah.
You're in the Army now, friend. Let's turn it to you because I'm so excited about this. So again, it's been probably about a year since we talked. So just give me an overview of what that discernment process looked like for you and how you ultimately determined that God is calling you to be a priest.
Sure, that's a good question. So actually, it was in high school when I first felt the calling toward the priesthood. My sophomore year, I was actually in a relationship. I had a girlfriend for about a year. And during that time, my sister was actually considering the religious life. So she was considering becoming a nun. And at first, my initial reaction was, that's really cool. Good for you. I don't think I'd ever see myself in that kind of a lifestyle. I want to get married kind of a thing. But just kind of in our conversations, my sister was very good about just talking to us. She talked a lot, like most women do, right? And so she opened a lot about just the experience she was going through. She would visit communities and tell me a lot about the religious life. And so that actually sparked a deep interest in the religious life. And so my senior year of high school, I actually wanted to enter seminary right out of the gate. My goal was like, right after I graduate, I want to go straight into seminary. But of course, God had other plans. I applied first actually to the Norbertines. I wanted to enter with the Norbertines. And they asked me to first get my associates. So I went to college for 2 years. I got my associates. And during that time, kind of as a side project, is where I started seeking sainthood, mainly just to kind of practice my communication skills, just kind of giving me some sort of a reason to study my faith more and kind of be more active about my faith in the public life as well. But after those 2 years, I applied to the Norbertines, and I actually didn't get in. That was the first time that I got denied from a seminary. And I won't disclose too much right now at the moment. I do have more information in my talk I did on my channel, but just to kind of give you guys a brief overview, and we can get more into the details, I think, as the show goes on. But I got my first letter of denial, and honestly, I think I took it pretty well. I realized, like, you know what? Ultimately, this is a call from God.
They just knew how dope you would look in that white habit. They couldn't do it. They couldn't give that to the world.
Yeah, I probably would stain my clothes every day. It's probably not happening there. So the battlefield sometimes get messy. Huh? Well, after that, I started working for a Hispanic Catholic network called El Sembrador. I was there for the past 3 years, actually. So I had the great opportunity. It was very providential because just about 2 weeks after I got that letter, I started working for this company. So the opportunity just kind of came very providentially. And that gave me a lot of peace, just knowing, hey, Lord, I know you have somewhere for me to be. And maybe you have some job I need to do in the meantime. So I started working for this company, and I started discerning with the fraternity. So this is actually around the time after high school is where I first discovered the traditional Latin Mass. Sure. And so I thought, after I applied to the Norbertines, if that doesn't work out, I want to give the Latin Mass a try. I want to do something like the Fraternity of St. Peter. And I also started going to a fraternity parish, so it just made sense that would be my next choice. So I started discerning with the fraternity, and that was a pretty long process. Thanks be to God, the fraternity does a great job of really making sure that the men have the right intentions. But after what was a very long, arduous, really pursuit of the fraternity, I ended up kind of getting to the last phase of getting interviewed. And after that, they actually asked me to wait 2 years before reapplying. And I was like, okay, fine. Ultimately, again, it's our Lord's time. And so about a year later, I reached out to them. And in my case, they actually asked me not to apply. And I share this because, sometimes people think that the discernment process is very straightforward, that you apply to the first seminary and you're automatically going to get in. But for me, it was a little different. And I think all of it was providential looking back. After that is when I talked to my spiritual director, and he suggested looking at the Institute of Christ the King. And so then last November, I went to visit them. I started my process. And for the glory of God, this September, in about 4 weeks, I'll be entering as a candidate. So they do 1 year of candidacy before actually entering seminary with the Institute.
Praise God. That's so incredible. Man, we have so much to break in. I guess my question first is this. So obviously you and I both grew up, and I'm sure we heard plenty of homilies, many prayers about vocations, many homilies about young men discerning priesthood and everything. So I think for a lot of people, for me, certainly it's interesting that you would think, yeah, you knock on a seminary's door and they just pull you in, no problem. Sure. Los Angeles has a really funny history about that, by the way. We don't got to go there, but LA, you know what you did. But I will say this, it's interesting. So when you are turned down from one order, in this case, the Norbertines or the fraternity, maybe not so much, we don't have to go into all the details, but just what are the qualifications or what are the things that they're kind of looking for when they're determining candidacy?
That's a good question. Yeah. So every community is a little different, obviously. But generally, the general things to look of just to kind of go for a visit, right? Because even to apply, there's kind of prerequisites that they kind of automatically will look for. Obviously, they want to make sure that you're kind of a normal functioning human being, that you have some sort of contribution in your family life and your parish life, that you do have some sort of a prayer life, that you have spiritual directives, and those kinds of things, right? That you're a normal functioning human being that actually has the right intentions. But beyond that, a lot of times there are things about health, whether it's your own health or family members' health. Financial things is a big thing for a lot of candidates. If you have debt, in my case, I didn't have any debt, right? But if you have any debt, if you have some sort of financial responsibility that you have to take care of, they go through all those kinds of things and to see whether the candidate is properly fit for the place. And there's also spirituality, right? Which is a big thing as well. If you feel more called to a contemplative life, you probably shouldn't be applying to a missionary community, right? Or vice versa. So there's a lot of things within the religious life, because there's also different spiritualities. Every community lives out their way of life in a distinct manner. And so they're also trying to see if you're actually called to that specific community.
You got that deep Salesian spirituality going for you. So, so what's interesting? So what's funny is, even though on my wall back here is, people can't see now, but I have St. Vitus's flag, of course, Los Angeles. The fraternity grabbed me first for Latin Mass. I've actually relocated here to St. Louis, and the Institute of Christ the King have a beautiful Gothic oratory downtown, and that's where the Oblates live. And realizing I had celebrated Latin Mass in tents and in like English architecture, now having Latin Mass in like a huge Gothic church, I feel like I'm stepping into the universe of Warhammer 40K. But the Institute, them in their blue, I mean, they do such a beautiful Mass. I can't believe the respect, and of course, all these different Latin Mass communities I've seen have done such beautiful jobs, but the Institute in particular, I think, has just such a great love for the liturgy, and that really does come across. It's always been nice to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's interesting because when it comes to discernment, again, there's different approaches and different stories. In my case, I didn't know about the Institute when I started discerning. I truly do believe that it's providential that I ended up at least entering with the Institute, right? Obviously, we don't know if I'm going to end up being ordained or not, because it is a long process, and in that process I'm going to learn a lot of things. But at the same time, the beautiful thing that I've experienced in my spiritual life is when you're discerning. Again, in my case, I had to jump through a bunch of hurdles. I remember there was one day that the fraternity asked me to get a psych evaluation. I had to fly out to Denver like on a short notice. I think it was a Friday.
And you didn't come visit me, my friend?
I did not. I didn't even know if I knew you were out there at that time. And so it was like a short minute notice, and I took a flight like within 2 days, and I forgot how much I paid to get that done. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make, and there's points of discernment where you realize, am I willing to do this to apply? Am I actually willing to go to that extent, or am I not going to take that risk? And so there's a lot of decisions you have to make. But I realized that in the discernment process, if you continue, and God has a way of doing this, of humbling us down. But if we actually accept God's process, we do things on his terms, and we accept everything. This is what St. Francis de Sales actually says. It's kind of funny because I've started over time kind of reading more St. Francis de Sales without even realizing that the Institute had his spirituality. So I'll just say that. But St. Francis de Sales basically says that if we accept everything as if it was given to us directly by the hand of God, then we truly make ourselves docile to his will. And that's what I've experienced. It's kind of incredible because after the biggest setbacks, I experienced moments of a lot of grace and just things I would have never imagined before.
Mhm.
I don't know if I shared with you actually, but last November, through work, I had the opportunity to go to Rome and to actually meet Pope Francis before he passed away.
Whoa.
And it's kind of incredible because that's something that you never really think. I mean, I would have loved to go to Italy and to the Vatican. I never thought I would have that opportunity. And it's kind of interesting because if I had been accepted by the Norbertines or the fraternity, that opportunity may have not actually come to fruition. But God's timing is perfect. And through work, I had this opportunity. And I'll share a brief story as well, just to show you some things that for me have been little confirmations that just says, hey, if you trust in God, he will show you through, and his plan is much greater than yours. So I had the opportunity again to go on a private audience with Pope Francis and actually shake his hand and see him, within inches before he actually passed away. And I know that many people may have different perspectives on our Holy Father, at least our previous father, but regardless of the fact, he was the vicar of Christ, and the opportunity to actually meet him for me was a great blessing, right? And so during that trip, I also had the opportunity to go to Gargano, Italy. Now, for those who don't know, Gargano, Italy is home to a cave that's dedicated to Saint Michael. So the story goes actually Saint Michael appeared in that cave and consecrated to him. In fact, the rocks from that cave are relics. And many times you see these little reliquaries with stones from the cave of Gargano, Italy.
Wow.
Now, I had the opportunity again. We were in San Giovanni del Tondo, which is where St. Padre Pio is from. And the entire group was going to go to see Padre Pio. But we were about 40 minutes from Gargano. Now, I have a big devotion to St. Michael. So I actually, with a friend of mine, we took a taxi and we kind of left the group to go on a journey to see the cave of St. Michael. Now, the interesting thing is, again, I had the opportunity to go into that cave. Now, after that, when I got back from that trip to Italy, within 2 weeks, I actually went then to St. Joseph's Shrine in Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, yep, the institutes.
So just a week after that trip, I got to go to visit the institute, and that's where I began the process with them. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm not sure if the canons know this. I'm going to ask them if this was intentional or not. But it was about March. I had not yet finished sending all my documents to them. And before I finished sending my application, before I submitted my application, they sent me an email saying that I had already been accepted. And it was interesting because that day was actually not only, first off, the day that Pope Leo XIV was elected, but it was also the same day that the church celebrates the apparitions of Saint Michael, specifically in Gargano, Italy. And so for me, that was just like a small little nugget, a small confirmation, just showing that God's plans eventually do come to fruition. So I don't know, that's kind of a neat story I want to share with you guys.
That's beautiful. God does have kind of funny timing on that too. He knows, right? He's like, I'm gonna wait till not only a new pope, but obviously this feast day coming around, and boom, here you go. So much break-in. I didn't know that you had to fly all the way to Denver for a psych eval with the fraternity. That's interesting. What's in Denver? Like, did you go to Carmel, or where did you have to go for that?
So I just met up with somebody that they had a connection out there. Not every candidate does. It kind of did have to do a little bit with my application. And so they asked me kind of to get that confirmation done. I don't think all applicants did, but in my case, I did have to go through that.
I was going to say, see, in your case, you're an online figure, so it's pretty easy to come across a couple of your videos and just see if you're off your rocker or not. I would think.
Sure.
Which you are, obviously.
I think ultimately, it's the way I interpret all of this is it's God's plan. I think if there's two things I would say that I learned from this entire process. The first is God wanted to see if I was actually serious about it. I think if I had dropped the gun earlier and kind of given up, then I probably didn't have a vocation, or at least not enough perseverance to actually really test it out. So I think God tries things, and sacred scripture says it all the time, right? You've probed me and you know me, dear Lord.
Yeah.
And so I think God first off wants to test us. I think this is the time, first off, that you do have to be very serious. If you're going to become a priest, and in the state of the church right now, you do have to have the right intentions, and not just the right intentions, but you also have to have the right desires and the virtue, and to be willing to be tested before going in. I think it helped me a lot. I think I desired it more, and I took it a lot more seriously. I think, again, I'm gonna have the opportunity to enter this September, and right now the appreciation I have for it, and the much I value it so much compared to before. I think if I hadn't gone through all those hoops, I wouldn't have valued it as much. And so I think that, again, God knows why he allows things to happen. Ultimately, sometimes we can kind of pick bones at, whatever person is in charge of our application or anything like that. But, we should trust in God and know that he allows things to happen for a reason. So, yeah.
When you went out there with the institute, so you went out to their seminary, which is located where?
So I didn't go to their seminary. Their
Got it.
seminary is in Italy. It's in
Oh, that's
Tuscany.
right. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's totally true. Oh,
So
they
I've
didn't just
actually
fly you out to experiment.
that
Mm-hmm.
would my French wasn't good enough. I'm
Yeah,
just
that's
kidding.
right. Oh, God,
So
that's right.
I haven't gone to their actual seminary, right? So for the institute, when you reach out to them, usually they'll send the guys to an apostolate within their country, right, or within their state.
Mm-hmm.
So in my case, I think for the U.S., I believe usually that's Detroit. Depending the case, might be different.
Yep.
So I got the chance to go to Detroit for about a week and just kind of spend time with the candidates at that time that had just entered, and just kind of see the parish life, get a little taste of the study that they do there and things like that.
I hope did you meet Canon Stephen Sharp by any chance?
I did.
So
Yeah.
I host a radio show called Ask a Priest Live, and
Right.
as a result, I've gotten to meet so many of the canons. So I actually have a picture. I had a layover, so we'd been doing the show together, Canon and I, and then on a layover, I finally got to meet him in person for the first time.
Oh,
So I've been very fond of all priests, but for the institute in particular, I feel like this year they've stepped up their presence in places. So it's been nice to kind of
that's
interact
really
with them more. What does that look like? Okay, so for a week, you're with other candidates. Are these guys who are in their first year, or are they kind of farther along? What does that feel like?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So again, this September, when I enter, I will be doing candidacy, right? So I'm a candidate for 1 year. After that year, if things go well and I'm still in there, most likely they'll send me out to their actual seminary again in Tuscany, Italy. So when I went to visit last November, I was spending time and I was kind of around the guys who had just entered that year, right? So last September, right? So when I entered in September, and if someone were to visit, they would kind of be around that fresh group of people. So when I went to visit, there was, I think, 3 candidates who had just entered a few months before. There was also, I forget his name. He was an abbe, a seminarian who was also visiting, who had more years of experience. I think he was just kind of helping teach the candidates and train them and things like that. So you're around the priests, you're around seminarians, and also the candidates who had just entered. Now, when I visited in November, the cool thing is I was actually there for the feast. I think it was, for the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. I think it was November, October time that I went to visit. And toward the end of my visit, it was actually the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, which is actually one of the patronesses. Our Lady is in her Immaculate Conception is a patroness of the Institute. So it was a pretty cool experience. I got to experience solemn vespers with them and just kind of see the ordinary life, but also the liturgical life. I got to spend my meals with them, have lunch, breakfast with them. So it was a cool experience for sure.
That's great. When you're in your candidacy, will you be wearing a cassock, or are you going to be in a suit, or I don't know, a baseball cap? I don't know what the people do.
That's a good question. Yeah. So I'm not considered like a seminarian just yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to be kind of in a dress, a button-up shirt and suits for mass and things like that. So we're going to be in ordinary clothes. I believe after the first year is when you actually be given the official cassock. Obviously, we will wear cassocks when we're serving mass and things like that. But outside of the liturgy, we'll be in ordinary clothes.
Let's talk about the process of discerning. I had a priest recently we were talking about vocation. Someone had a question that they sent in for the radio show, talking about like wrestling with discernments, marriage or call to religious life is what this guy was talking about. And the priest at the time said something really interesting. He said, well, marriage is a natural vocation. Like you don't need a ton of convincing. There's not a lot of people who really have obviously there's decision points to make, but like generally speaking, the calling for religious life, a higher vocation is just different. And so I just kind of want to ask you, when it came to your own discernment process, do you remember, was there a particular moment when you said, I think God is calling me really for this? Or is it a series of 1,000 cuts,
Sure. That's a good question. So I think God has a way of kind of like, the term I would use is like wooing us.
Yeah.
When it comes to discernment. Obviously in a relationship, it's a lot clearer, but I truly do believe that there's some sort of wooing. And it's kind of interesting because when I began my discernment process, it was a lot more kind of like what they say, like it was a lot more sweet, right? Kind of like your honeymoon phase. Versus like I had a lot more desires. I would see priests in the liturgy and I would just be attracted to it. So it was definitely my passions had a role in that. Like I just felt really inspired to live that kind of a lifetime. I think over time, and again, I haven't even entered candidacy, but even just again, over the course of these 5 years, it got pretty serious. And there was many times where either one, I would have very strong urges in the opposite direction. and I would feel called or attracted to certain individuals. I'm like, dear
Mhm.
Lord, like if you're calling me to marriage, just let
You
me
better
know.
tell me.
And I'll talk to my spiritual director and say, just so you know, Father, like I'm a man and I'm attracted to women. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
just to make that clear. And so over time, and it might not be the case for everybody, but for me, I remember very intense moments where I had to make the decision. It was up to me, right? Again,
Mm,
I had every reason to stop because first off, I had already tried and I had been
yeah,
denied 2 times,
true.
right? So no one would have blamed me for saying, "Hey, Esteban, you gave it a shot and you met a good traditional woman and you got married."
Mhm.
There would have been no fault there. But there was very intentional moments where I had to kind of in prayers say, "Dear Lord, I still want this. Like
Mm,
I'm choosing, even though I know I can have the other option. I know I can get married. I know I can have a financial. And that's the thing when you're kind of just starting off, there is
yeah,
that worry of like, hey, if I get married, am I actually able to financially sustain a
provide.
family?
Mhm.
But I think because I had a stable job for a while and I saw the skills I had, I came to a point where I said, I totally can. I'm able to financially sustain a family if that's what God is calling me to. But I had a very intense moment where I had to decide, am I going to continue with this or am I not?
Mhm.
And at that point, it was no longer like, dear Lord, give me a sign. In my mind, it was, Lord, I want to prove to you that I want this. I
Yeah.
want to prove to you that in the midst of all these other reasons I have, you know, I want this and I want to give you this shot. I'm going to keep trying. I would tell people like, I'm going to keep going until, I get on the wanted list, the blacklist from the Vatican. I'm just kidding. But until it's very clear, it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like the other reasons weren't good enough for me. It's like, I don't think that was convincing to me or my spiritual director. So I'm like,
Mm.
I'm going to keep going until I have a good reason, a convincing reason not to. Um, so
Yeah, and you've hit on something which I think is what I've seen with a lot of young men, both those who are discerning the priesthood and those who are actually becoming priests, which is I've the heart of a priest is the heart of a father, obviously, just as God is our father. And I think for a long amount of time, and this is why even earlier I talked a little bit about the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, which is a place near and dear to my heart. Obviously, we both have
sure.
attended and attend mass there. That being
Yeah.
said, there was a scandal back certainly from the changes on through the '90s with the seminary there. I think that's St. John. Oh, I
In
can't remember what
Camarillo,
it
right?
is. In Camarillo, yep, that's the one. And anyway, essentially they would have these like very like conservative Orthodox men going into the priesthood, really feeling called, and in probably some cases very genuinely called. And they would discern them out because they were like pastorally unready or just some other. I mean, you can plug in whatever words you kind of want. But at the end of the day, what I'm really seeing, what I think is such an important thing to remind ourselves of the priesthood is that you want to make sure that your priests are these shepherds, are men that are called up from their natural kind of states in life, right? So
Mhm.
priests are not formed on a conveyor belt. Priests are not, they're not stamped out of the mold of guys who like never had
Mhm.
a shot at marriage or anything, but they really are men who are giving up a great part of themselves to pursue after the Lord. And I think having that in focus, like making sure that our priests are also sculpted in the heroic virtues that masculinity properly
Mhm.
oriented can hold, is something that the church is obvious in desperate need for, not just of course in the priesthood, but certainly for married life, right? For the life of men in general. So it's been very refreshing to kind of see that back in with a lot of guys who've really been going through seeing what God wants them to do.
Yeah, the cool thing about having gone through different seminaries and different application processes is that I get to meet a lot of different guys. Right.
Yeah.
So I know guys that did make it through the Norbertines and are currently, a couple years in. I know guys in the fraternity as well. So that's been really cool because I'll kind of run across them at different occasions and be like, hey, how's it going? And even with the Diocese of Los Angeles, I know a lot of guys who are in there as well. So it's kind of cool just to kind of
Yeah.
to meet different guys that are in there. And I'll definitely agree with you that, especially in the Norbertines, the fraternity, the Institute, a lot of great guys, solid men that really does kind of inspire you, right? Because sometimes you feel like you're alone in the process and you meet
Mm.
other guys that are kind of in the same playing field as you and like, wow, this is good, this is refreshing. Because I'll tell you this, even though, when we say, oh, there's a bunch of bad candidates or bad priests even sometimes, it can be very easy to think, oh, well, if I go in there, I can fix it or I can be a good priest.
Sure.
But it's totally, you're totally dependent on God. And I have every, reason, or I mean, because of my human nature, I can fall just as they did, if not worse. And that's kind of a scary thing. It's like two things. You go in there realizing, God, I'm trusting on you, and sometimes I'm going to fail, but I need your help. And there's something really raw about that. Just kind of knowing that I'm going to go into discern. First off, I don't know again if I'm actually called. But secondly, if I am called, I don't want to be a bad priest. I want to be a good priest.
Yeah.
And so how do you actually continue to trust in God? I think ultimately it's just that. You actually do have to be a spiritual person to be a priest, right? You can't just have, every physical attribute, but you don't really have a spiritual life. And I've learned that even over the course of these past 5 years, that there's many times, whether it's just things that are happening in my life, but especially with my discernment, that I really did depend on prayer, where prayer was kind of the one thing that was really sustaining me and pulling me through. And I really do believe that the same way that God allowed me to overcome those struggles in the past is the same way that he's going to help me overcome what's coming ahead. And so I think that if we are present in our state of life and we trust God in the little things, I think we can definitely trust him in the big things.
You, if I remember correctly, had started attending Latin Mass after high school, correct?
That's right, yeah.
So even though you'd felt, I think you talked about earlier, you'd felt kind of the nudges maybe towards some vocation like priesthood, your experience of Latin Mass, has that kind of been obviously the drive to unlock it? I would imagine so, since you're discerning with the Institute, for heaven's sake. But nonetheless, like I've noticed that a lot of people in particular, when they rediscover the traditional Latin Mass, I feel like every guy goes through this, like, for you, it's much deeper. For every other guy, it's like kind of a lot of guys, it's like a short term, like, oh my gosh, I'm called to be a priest. And then they don't like put in the rigmarole to actually discern that. Right. But what has the impact of the traditional Latin Mass done for you just in terms of pursuing vocation?
Sure, that's a great question. So you're right. Yeah, I had the intention of entering seminary before even knowing what the Latin Mass was. And again, the first seminary I visited was my junior year of high school. Well, I didn't actually attend Latin Mass regularly until, again, a year after I graduated. The Latin Mass has really transformed my life in general. And I've said this before, the Latin Mass has really just, in the simplest way, it's really intensified my love for God. It really has. And it's kind of interesting because I'm not really that much of an intellectually driven man. I like to know things, but I like to know just enough that I need to know to get the thing done, right? Yeah. So if I'm gonna get a job done, I don't need to know all the information. Just like tell me what I need to know, and I'll be fine. And so with the Latin Mass, I didn't really go into like a deep digging. My brother did. He went down the rabbit hole, like really studying a bunch of stuff. I just saw the basics, and I was convinced. Serving the Latin Mass has just been super intense for me. It's intensified my prayer life. I feel a lot more attracted to God. I feel a deeper desire to pray. I have a love for the spiritual things. I have a love for sacred art, sacred music that I didn't have before. And so in many ways, when it comes to priestly discernment, it's made me a lot more attracted to the priesthood. And it's also, again, like after discovering the Latin Mass, I was like, if I'm going to become a priest,
that's the kind of priest I'm going to be.
Yeah, it's like I can't, for two reasons. One, because for me as a priest, I want to offer the most perfect worship to God, because the priest's primary role is to offer worship to God or sacrifices to God on behalf of the people in reparation for their sins. And so if that's my primary function as a priest, then I want to offer worship in a perfect way, which is as pleasing as possible. And the second thing is I want to feed my flock in the way that's most sustainable and most powerful. And so because of that, I can't know about the Latin Mass. I mean, I feel like I can't know about the Latin Mass and not offer that to them. I feel like it would just kind of destroy my conscience. Like, how can I know that there's a better way to worship God and a better way to lead my flock and not be able to do that? So for me, it was like, I truly feel called to this.
Yeah. And we talked about that a little bit the first time you were on with me. And I think that's so great. I can't believe we never really found each other while I was out in Los Angeles, but that's all right. Something I've been really, really meditating on is the fact that my faith, of course, was deepened by going to the traditional Latin Mass. And I was telling the story just today, but when I was ushering, I still love to usher for Mass. I never served the traditional Latin Mass. I wish I did or have, because I was an altar boy all my life growing up. And I love that. But of course, I feel like it was an altar culture where you kind of hit the age of 14, let's say, and you just kind of stopped. You graduated if you're going to do other lay roles at Mass, then you were going to do that, or you just kind of stopped. I think I have a huge feel that if I had grown up with the traditional Latin Mass that I'd be that guy who's like 80 years old, like, Father, do you need a server? You know. That being said, I with the usher team that I was been a part of for a year, you're also a Eucharistic guardian. And one day at Low Mass, one of the server, there just wasn't another server, so you can double up as an usher. So I'm holding the paten, and I had such a profound experience because there's that sort of proximity with the priest who is giving Christ body, blood, soul, and divinity to the faithful. But even in the traditional Latin Mass on a paten, I saw particles, visible particles of our Lord at the end of the day on the paten. And for me, I had never really had that experience before. We've talked, there's so much conversation about the dangers of communion on the hand, and people, I think mostly because we just know not what we do than any malice, but the potential of dropping our Lord. But to actually see it in like a traditional Latin Mass setting, I was completely floored. I made a video about it and everything because I just recognized the real serious importance of the Eucharist, but also trying to say that if indeed that is God there, right, there under the species of bread and wine, that we should make sure that we try as best as humanly possible to make sacrifice to him fitting. And so we humans are imperfect, which is why the only thing we can offer to God is God, right? And so just, the beauty, the idea of, I'm with you where I've seen priests and I've seen the priesthood all my life. And for myself, I'm very fortunate. I think that it was in high school, still when I was attending the Novus Ordo pretty commonly, when I first saw a priest, I think, who really exemplified heroic witness to the faith. I'm sure the other ones before, I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying this one really kind of drew me. Sure. But with a lot of the structure of the Latin Mass, I think, and how it really focuses in the priest on the sacrifice, I would say that if you are to be a priest in the modern world, if you are to combat the evils of this world with the strongest medicine we have, I think the Latin Mass would definitely be what you're looking for.
I think the cool thing about the Latin Mass too is just the precision of it. I think who was it? Jester Romero was giving a conference the other day, and he was talking about this. Just the precision in the prayers. I was just, there's many times where I was kind of just reading the English translation of the prayers at a Mass or a blessing, and I was just in awe of just how precise the prayers were, which is a very beautiful thing. I think it really does kind of unlock or kind of really show forth the priesthood in a different way. When you see just how powerful those priestly blessings are in the Latin Mass, how specific they are, and also how long they are, right? The people kind of just tend to be sitting there all day. I think sometimes, and I think it's going to be kind of interesting discerning the priesthood. I have a natural tendency to communicate, right? I like to talk. I have a platform and things like that.
What, you?
That kind of. So it's going to be interesting, like with the knowledge base, because I've only just kind of really touched the surface in my own studies, but just kind of the knowledge base that I'll be getting. I'm kind of interested in seeing what that's going to look like. And I truly do want to help make the Latin Mass more, we don't have to make it completely understandable because ultimately it is a mystery and a sacrifice, right? But I have noticed that there are a lot of people that attend the Latin Mass, and even for a long time, that don't really understand even the most basic of things, that they really just think everything's a complete mystery, and I really don't have any source of reference. I think there's many, obviously, people that are doing this already. But I'm interested in seeing how can we actually help the average person in the Latin Mass pew to deepen their relationship with God by even just a couple simple things that can really help them understand more of what's going on.
Well, that's very beautifully said. I've helped with a couple of videos and endeavors to hopefully aid that. One of my jokes now is that I like we're a blend of the old and the new, right? So that I want my masses as old and solemn as possible, but I also want to film it at 8K 60 frames per second, which I think is kind of where like the Latin Mass community is right now for all these young people. Like I was watching on YouTube, someone makes these Latin Mass edits. They're like these 1 minute, just like set to like, I don't know, it's like set to like electro music. It's so funny, but just like smash cut of like the incense going up and the consecration to the priest doing the Dominus Vobiscum. And I'm just like, I'm here for all of it. This feels so good. I don't think social media has been all bad to the Catholic Church at the end of the day. But there is something very, very interesting in what you said, because it is true that a lot of critics of the traditional Latin Mass will say, well, it's not comprehensive or comprehensible to the people in the pew. The laymen don't get this. There was an attack recently, a huge attack on the traditional Latin Mass going on in Charlotte. And this is one of the things in the writings of His Excellency down there that he talks about, that it's all these priests thrusting the trappings of tradition onto the faithful who don't know enough Latin to really discern it or to make sense of it or anything. And I thought, well, that feels like a very, especially, we're celebrating the 100 years of the Cristeros. I just feel like that just feels like a very disingenuous kind of old tired argument. The idea that just because you might not understand every single thing,
Sure.
and we do live in an age of missiles, it doesn't mean that, of course, there's not great beauty and value, and that we as lady especially get it that way.
Sure. Yeah, we talked about this last time. I truly
Mm-hmm.
think that you don't really need to know that much about the Latin Mass. Again, every person is different. There are people who are more intellectual and they do want to understand things.
Yep.
I just have a tendency to be more passion driven, and so I'm totally fine with not understand. I can go through a Mass and have just the most spiritual experience ever without having understood a word that was said. But that's just me. Every
Yeah.
person is a little different. But I do think that there should be a way to do that, right? To kind of help people understand the basics. And you mentioned there is a missal. But how do we actually make that kind of more accessible to people? So I think that's going to be kind of interesting. I'm interested in kind of seeing how that's going to look, and the church as well, because even recently, again, with Pope Leo XIV, and a new pope, by the way, but with our new pope, we did have for the first time the Catholic Church actually kind of highlighting what we call Catholic influencers and those who use social media and they're in for the church and for the glory of God. So I think it's, again, an interesting time.
Yep.
I don't think I would have had as much exposure to media, to YouTube, to video editing and all this, again, had I entered seminary sooner. So I do think it's kind of interesting that this kind of did become a part of my history, a part of my story, so to speak, just because I had a communications background and I wanted to kind of find a new platform. And through work, I had the opportunity to develop an app. So I've gotten all this exposure through technology, to media, which I think is also going to be kind of interesting to see how do I actually then use that in my vocation as well.
Well, and I mean, first off, congratulations on over 3,000 subscribers. Not surprised, by the way.
Appreciate that.
Wonder if they'll let you have that while you're in seminary. We'll find out. But the next thing is there is this, again, as we said, there's such an interesting intersection right now of technology and the faith, and I think that it's good that we really take advantage of it in the proper sort of use. I think that can be a helpful reclamation sometimes of technology. The Catholics, we don't have a Luddite view of new things necessarily. We don't want to smash computers because they're new, but instead we just want to contextualize that which we have. Pope Leo XIV has already talked about this, and not just because he's taken the namesake of Pope Leo XIII, who I have a great devotion to, but the fact that very early on he's coming out talking about the dangers of AI. Sure. It's not that all AI is bad. It certainly can be a tool, but just the idea that we're not going to have our human faculties check something which could kind of help to destroy people's souls, I do think is a really interesting thing that he's mentioned.
I think so, yeah. And again, it's kind of interesting, like you mentioned, how do we have this ever ancient liturgy when it comes specifically to the traditional Latin Mass, these ancient practices, but we do have them in the midst of a modern society. I don't think that liturgy really has to adapt itself in any way. I think it's beautiful the way it is. Yeah. But you mentioned how do you shoot that that shot in a 4K or 8K? How do you kind of give it expression? How do you really kind of give it a platform? How do you kind of articulate it in a way that the modern ear can understand? I think it's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, very much so. So when you were there for your week, did you start learning French then, or are you going to have to learn French later?
So I started just hearing French and I had no idea what they were saying. Je comprends un peu le français. So I've been practicing a little bit.
I gotta tell you, first off, I love Spanish. I love Latin. And I'm going to say something that might be very, very controversial. This is my only criticism of the Institute. And that is that I think that French might be the worst of the Romantic languages for me. I don't get, I mean, I kind of get, but I don't get how you could have Latin, right, which is very phonetically consistent. You have Spanish, which is very phonetically consistent. And then you have French, and they're like, hey, what if we add like an E, an A, a U, and an X to the end of words? And we are going to now say that we're the best language that any Romance has ever created. I just don't know. I'm skeptical.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I had never planned to learn a foreign language. And if it was a foreign language, it'd probably be Latin, right? I had no plans to learn French. And if you guys had given me a choice, I mean, the last thing I would have said is, let's go to a seminary where they speak a completely different language that I have to learn from scratch. And you're right, there are similarities with Spanish and things like that. But I think it's kind of interesting. I think it's part of God's humor. Like, you have to enter this beautiful seminary that does the Latin Mass very well, and you have to learn French. It's like,
oh, that's fine.
It's like, I think God has a sense of humor where it's like, if you're going to do this, your litmus test is, are you willing to learn French? And so I never saw myself studying French. Again, I have no background in it either. So I've been kind of doing stuff on the side right now to kind of prepare. For the first year of candidacy, we'll be speaking English and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We're going to be studying French and learning French. But after that first year, if I enter seminary in Tuscany, I heard that everything is in French, like all the classes.
Oh man.
So, we're just in for the ride kind of a thing.
You're gonna come back with the most like French of like mustaches and goatees you're ever gonna see, Well, give us an overview then. So what does throughout a first year, you talked about studying French, and so what does it look like for candidates on that first year? What do classes look like, or how does a day look like?
Sure, that's a good question. Yeah, so I would just kind of give you what I know based on my visit and the stuff I've heard. Obviously, I'm going to experience it pretty soon here.
That's right.
Well, first thing is you're living the parish life, right? So you're living at a parish. I've already been assigned to my parish, and so I know where I'm going this September. I won't kind of disclose too much of that here, but I'll tell you afterward.
Sure.
So I'll be at a parish for that first year and living the parish life. So first off, that means the divine office, right? So they come together to chant the divine office and obviously the liturgy and the mass. But apart from that, we do have basic classes. It's not seminary, but we are learning a bit of Latin, some French, a little bit of the spirituality of the Institute of Christ the King.
You better not get that twisted up again. I heard that fraternity almost slip out.
I was going to say fraternity, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny too because out of all the communities I've applied to, the Institute is the one I've spent the least time with and know the least about, right? Because with the fraternity, like I went to a fraternity parish.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time looking into them. Same thing with the Norbertines. I knew a bunch of Norbertines and things like that. The Institute is like, I don't know that much about them.
I feel like that's how they like it too, honestly. If you were going to say the difference of the Institute and the fraternity, like the fraternity is what is the army is what I say of the Latin mass. It's like they'll get into a place, we'll have mass in a tent, it's totally fine. But the Institute's pretty rough and ready too. But when they're the SEALs, they want to be the SEAls.
Yeah, no, so it's kind of interesting. Anyway, but with that being said, you'll learn about the Institute, probably about the founders. Like when I went, they had this whole class about like kind of the history and the way that the divine office turned into Liturgy of the Hours. So you kind of get some basics on the liturgy and things like that. Obviously, it's not as formal as seminary, but you do have a daily schedule. You have a wake-up time. You have the entire schedule planned out, like when you have to have your meals, when you're going
Estevan, 1 second there. For some strange reason, your audio cut out on me. Let me just check real quick. Here, say something, please.
Sure. Audio test, 1, 2, 3. Mic test, 1, 2, 3.
Where did you go?
Let's see.
That's live, baby. Here, 1 second.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't mean to derail what your story was. It just cut off.
Oh, you're good.
Way, so
no, you're good.
I
appreciate that.
Let me just make sure. Okay, you're in my head.
Okay. Are we here? Audio test.
Technical difficulty, friends. No worries, though. We'll be back up and running in just a moment here. Always something. Okay, I can hear audio from my computer.
Audio test.
Where did you go? Hang on.
Sure.
OBS. Default Spieltech odds. Huh. Very, very strange. I still can't hear you. Dang. Okay. Well, I still want to talk to you. So I'll tell you what. I'll end the stream. So friends, real quick, this has been such a great conversation. We'll get up and running. So when I have the parts edited together and kind of release it, you'll be able to see that. But hey, please keep Estevan in your prayers. Also check out his channel, Seeking Sainthood. It's actually, it's going to be nuked in a second when you join the Institute. So I might as well say it now. It's been one of my favorite channels for the young Catholic world. Not to mention I've been really enjoying your other podcast appearances and stuff, by the way, brother. But please keep him in your prayers and definitely subscribe to Seeking Sainthood, YouTube, Instagram. And also, please don't forget to subscribe to my podcast, the Glad Child Podcast, right here, where we do fun content like this. So you won't hear any of this unless you're hearing it live because I'm going to stitch these parts together. But until next time, God bless you. May He keep you. We'll see you on the next one. Adios.